Okay, so basically what we're trying to do is we got a customer that was concerned. He went to he grabbed a set of injectors from us, decided he wanted to take them and have tested somewhere else, and they were done on one of these little green machines. The reason we don't build big injectors or larger injectors in stock on one of these is simply because it's small, it's lightweight, all the lines and the pump are small, and it'll keep up with stock injectors. But when you try to run this stand on VL on an injector that's modified, it has a very difficult time keeping up with the volume that the injector is trying to inject. And as the VL test is going, rail pressure is bouncing all around, and per their information, not mine, they ran one injector several times, and to prove my point, they got a 159.93 on one injector. They ran it again, they got a 154.8. They ran it again, they got a 159.15.
Hey.
154.8.
Was in it the other week. Did you?
Yeah. When rail pressure is bouncing, quantity is going to chase it. At the end of the actual seconds, wherever it's at for rail pressure and wherever it's at for quantity, it spits out a number. It's within 5 cc's on this stand. That's pretty damn accurate. It's repeatable. It's doing the same thing within 5 cc's. But the exact same injector on a stand that's big enough to actually support it, we come out with 146, and another injector coming out of the exact same stand comes out at 144.6. Another injector out of the set comes out at 144.8. Another injector comes out at 143.7, and another one comes out at 145.1. So the moral of the story is, the reason we use aftermarket stands is because they've got bigger lines, they've got bigger pumps. We can drive them harder if we need to. We can adjust pump flow. Hell, we can put bigger pumps in if we absolutely need to. We're not using this to try and build big aftermarket injectors. We're using this to verify that when we purchase OE parts, we can run it in an OE stand and make sure that it's meeting OE standards. All the aftermarket stuff gets done in big stands. This thing I could throw. I'm not throwing it. This isn't going very far. Huge transformer, big pump, big lines, real stuff. Skylar's over here and he's running nothing but CP3 pumps right now. So we can dump the CP3 pump out of this. Pump drive flange, electric motor. We can drive the CP3 pumps as hard as we want and measure flow.
You want these guys.
This is armadillo number 1, first armadillo we ever bought. We've got more injectors that have beat this stand up, over 400 millimeters cubed. Hell, at one time, weren't we pushing them to 5 in this thing? Like 5, and at that point, this stand was constantly failing. Lines were breaking, things were bursting, flow meters were breaking. So 500 mm cubed was really all we could get out of this thing, and I didn't trust the data there, so we had to start pulling the injector duty cycle down. Instead of running it at 1700, we had to drop to 1600. We'd make the injector bigger, we had to drop it down to 1500. We'd make the injector bigger, we had to drop it down to 1400. Pretty soon, the injectors are big enough that we were having to run them at 160 MPa at 1100 microseconds to keep this thing from getting killed all the time. Once we have the yardstick and we've got the data and we go to the dyno, whatever input numbers you've got really don't matter. That's just, it's the same yardstick. So This was generation 1 stand for building big ass injectors. Now, this stand is basically as bad as it gets at this point. This thing's factory rated to run 1,000 millimeters cubed. We can run locomotive injectors in here, large ship injectors in here, whatever we want. We're not going to hurt this thing. The pump in the back of this is ginormous. You know how many horse that pump is, Skylar? That's 25 or 30, and this one's quite a bit bigger.
I think
So
so.
I'm guessing this is 40, but you've got a 40 horsepower pump driving just the one injector. You've got plenty of stand to sustain the abuse and the fuel quantity and the demand of what we're trying to give you on the really, really, really big stuff. Recently, the sensor that measures the actual rate shape, that sensor has failed. So because what we're doing with rate shape is we're capturing injector quantity into this stainless steel line, the sensor sees the pressure captured into here, which is, you can regulate that pressure. It sees that pressure, it measures the cycle of the pressure, and as that pressure is dumping off, it responds to that, and it shows us an actual line that we would call rate shape. It's a beautiful tool, but that sensor gets the hell beat out of it, so we've got a new one coming. How many months have you had this thing in service?
Right a year ago.
12 months? 12 months, and we've already killed our first rate shape sensor. We've got a new one coming. That'll be here tomorrow. We may have to rescale that, but that's just part of the game. Like, this is being an aftermarket injector company. There's no blueprint. There's no book to read. We're having to learn and teach ourselves and use guys that make these stands for their information, feeding them data. When we're killing parts, they've got to know about that because we're doing things that nobody else on the planet is actually doing. So, a real quick shot down that way. We got stock style test stand that Adrian is currently on, measuring aftermarket injectors. You see that I don't have 5 of those. I've got 5 of the aftermarket stands here because those 5 stands, for what we're doing, we trust a lot more. They're just a better tool for what it is we're doing. If you've got to shovel a ditch, a shovel will get it done, but an excavator gets it done a lot more accurately and a lot faster. So these are basically excavators, all of different sizes. That's just a real quick shop tour of what it is we're doing, and I guess I can show you. We've got injectors torn apart. This stuff came in for testing. I can tell you that this is an LB7 because that little DNH puck right there, the LB7 is the only one that uses that. Those things come in different lengths for different tensions or pre-tensions on those springs. He's got, this looks like a good fresh set. So Eric, the guy that's working in this area, Eric, what you building? Eric's not here. He's got a set of LB7s going. I'm not sure what size they are, 45%. He's gonna end up running those in the bigger stands. Probably Armadillo 1, I'd guess. And Skylar, how many CP3 pumps you got checked today?
Just that one today.
Just the one?
Yep.
And then, so it's already done. So this is one of our 12s.
Yep.
How'd it do? Everything's fine.
Injectors came in.
Okay.
There were some issues with the injectors, so you can just get everything checked before you put a new set of injectors in.
Good deal. Okay. So basically, one of our 12 millimeter pumps, brought it in for a health check. It flies through with, passing colors. Now we can configure this thing back to putting like injectors in it if we need to. But since we have this as a spare stand, we don't have enough bodies to run all the stands. We're better off just leaving this, and then when the next 1 or 2 or 3 pumps come in, we go through and just start cycling more pumps on it. Jeff, you got all those tested for me?
Yes, sir.
And what do you got? Just explain to me real quick. What are all these, Jeff?
These are our DNHs. That's what's going to balance and take care of the contribution of each injector.
On the VL.
On the VL, yes.
So basically, these things come in several different thicknesses that we measure in micron, and it is overall responsible for the needle inside the nozzle, how far it lifts, right?
How far it travels, yes, sir.
And then the shim just behind that with the DNH holder, that's called what?
The DFK.
DFK.
Yep.
Like Dogfight King. So, and that one is more responsible for things like emission set points and idle, correct?
And idle, yep.
So all of these shims that we've got sitting in stacks around here, each one of these things is, depending on what it is, anywhere from like $1 to $5 each. So it takes several $1,000s just to buy enough shims to be able to calibrate the injectors and get them within that 2% that we like to brag about. Now, this set of injectors that we just ran this morning, you've got, is this the last of the 6 right here?
That's the last of the 6, yes.
And can you please come with me with these sheets and print out one of our flow sheets so we can show everybody what it looks like, how many percent they are out?
Yeah.
All right, so there's that one. Adrian, you still cooking on the rest of them there?
Good. Got them all for you.
Thank you, buddy.
So this one, there's one that's high.
Okay, so let's, you know what, we got
But all the others.
add some
came in.
DNH. Throw like a 2 DNH in it,
Okay.
and let's just bring that down right now. Okay, so we've got one injector that pumped at 151 in that stand. So it's about 5 cc's higher than the rest of them, basically. So, sorry buddy, I'm gonna grab my phone. So at 100, let's say 150, 150
What it delivered,
times
did it deliver higher?
103%, that would be a 154. Hey Jeff, that's less than 4% out.
Yep.
So please adjust it real quick so we can show everybody what it's like.
Absolutely.
Now, not my numbers, but the OEM number on VL, not my test sheet. I didn't create this. I'm just reading it. They allow 126.2 plus or minus 5.5. So basically 5.5 times 2 equals 11, correct? Okay, good at math. So if we take 126.2 times 110% equals 138. So they're allowing approximately 10% deviation, 9 point something percent with factory injectors, and that gives you a green check mark. This one injector that Jeff's about to adjust for you right now is 3.5 or 4% out. We brag to be 2, so we're gonna tweak it very, very soft, and we're gonna bring it down just a little bit. And that's basically out of pride. This thing would have ran perfect, for God's sakes, unless the motor is absolutely perfect with virtually 0 miles and a fresh rebuild, and all the machine work was exactly perfect. So piston protrusion was identical, ring end gap is identical, valve recession is identical. This motor would have to be blueprinted perfectly, and you still wouldn't notice a 4% deviation in that injector. But what do you got for a shim thickness there, Jeff?
119.
119?
Yep.
So you're gonna go up to like a 120, 121 kind of thing?
Yep.
Okay. The shims are really small. They're hard to handle. These guys are really good with like the little tweezers at a right angle. And you know, they've got their gloves. When I was doing this on the daily, I used a wooden toothpick because it's non-magnetic, and my fingers. But these guys are a lot faster at it than I ever was. So I'm just gonna let them do what young kids do and get better than I ever was. A nozzle nut, Jeff, like how tight do you torque that?
We torque it to 50.
Are you going to use this as your torque wrench, Jeff?
Nope, I am not.
You're going to use this as your torque wrench?
Every time.
Okay, just checking. So that's a torque wrench?
Yes,
You only click it once?
One time.
Those are all hints for those of you that use torque wrenches and bang on them 3 times. Stop that. It's hard on the wrench. You don't get any better data. And for those of you that call me and tell me that your stuff fell apart and I ask you what you torqued it to and you tell me it was to spec, you're full of shit. This is your torque wrench. I know you. I've known you for a very long time, every one of you. The reason this is here, you break the nozzle nuts free with this. So basically I could weld this thing right there. We would never need to cross it over there because we do not tighten anything with this. This is only here to loosen stuff up. This thing only goes to torque. So we had this was at 151 before?
Yep, 151.
And since we know that it passes in all of the settings, you don't need to run this stand in all the other settings and waste a bunch of time.
Nope.
You're just going to run this on VL.
Yep.
So it's going to go through a conditioning cycle first. Mm-hmm. And then basically that's purging out the air and getting the injector up to temperature, making sure that we've got no air bubbles in the injector, because air will throw out your results and make them all bad. And then it's going to start measuring. We've got 1600 bar. It's going to come back up to 1600.
Yep.
And once it gets to 1600, we're going to start to count data. We've got a progress graph right there. We've got our rail pressure. We want that rail pressure to be virtually stable, stable, stable. If it's bouncing by 5 or 10 MPa, your data is going to be no good. We're measuring 146.6, and all the rest of them are like 144, 145s.
Yep.
So this injector is now it's in the same exact game.
Yep.
So this set, as you punch it into the Excel spreadsheet, it's going to tell you how many percent out this set is, right?
Yep.
So you're going to plug in all these numbers that we just measured. Mm-hmm. Excel is going to tell us how many percent out it is. What do you figure this set's going to be within, like 1.5%, 2% kind of thing?
1.5. Yeah.
What's the absolute tightest set of injectors that you've ever balanced?
0.14.
0.14% out.
Yep.
Booyah. To do that, again, it's pride, it's kind of fun, it's a big challenge, but you don't need to get things any tighter than 2%. The motor, even on the biggest set of injectors that can make 3,000 horsepower, the motor would never know the difference between 1 or 2% or 0.14%. So next we're going to grab all these data sheets and we're going to walk out. I'm going to ask him lots of questions while he's putting it into Excel so you guys can see the process on how we tweak, how we tune. Upstairs we got a guy that's going through the shim stack inside the injector. He's basically measuring all the different shelves in the injector, and there's a mathematical program in that stand that tells us what shim to start with. So when he gets his job done correctly, they can come down here and get balanced pretty rapidly and pretty accurately. So we're not wasting a whole bunch of time down here just throwing the whole shim stack at it and hoping that it works. That would be horrendously time consuming and not very accurate. Okay. So you over there on the OEM machine,
yes.
What number injector are you on now?
I'm on number 5 right now.
You're on number 5.
Correct.
So he's been done. He was moving on to his second set of injectors, and I asked him to go back. So he's run at least 7 injectors now, and you're still on number 5.
Correct. Yeah.
There's things that we have to do in the aftermarket world to make a living, and we can't make a living when we're consuming time like that, especially when we can't trust the data. So your sheets, Adrian, are I got 3, I got 4. So if you think of these test stands, basically just like a dynamometer, you can go to a dyno and get a horsepower reading. Let's say it's 1,500. You take the exact same truck to a different dyno. It could be in the same town. You're not going to see 1,500. It's going to be a different number. So the real key here is we use those machines. We get quantities. We balance them per that quantity. We go to our dyno and we know how much power that injector does with like stock calibration, stock tuning. If you've added tuning, you've added turbochargers, you've done things to your truck, we're still giving you we're still giving you what we're selling you. You're just enhancing that by changing the rest of the system. These quantities, these guys, no matter which machine they're using, in their stand, they can look up DDP 325-50, and there is a test plan in there for that. And as long as they balance it in that machine to that test plan, it's going to spit out the quantity that we've measured on the dyno and accurately have good horsepower numbers off of. This thing isn't a junk machine. I'm not trying to say that, but it was built to run stock quantities. It's asking for 126, and if I put a stock injector in there, the rail pressure is going to be much more stable at 126. We're asking it, those stands are basically 145, so about 20 mm3 more. This stand is kind of all over the board. So with one injector, it measures 156. With the other injector, it measures 155. With the other injector, it measures 160. With the other injector, it measures 153. So we've got a 7 cc deviation within the first 5 injectors. Over here, we're at 1 or 2 cc's. Now, why is that? Well, that's because those things can maintain rail pressure much more stable. This thing on VL, the rest of the settings are going to be pretty accurate because it's able to keep up with the amount of quantity on the lower settings when you're not asking for it to give you all. On our EM1, a factory test plan is 33.4 plus or minus 5.8. Well, our 50 horse injector on that stand measures 33.44. On the LL idle, it's asking for 10.5 plus or minus 5.2. I find that to be a garbage data point. We want our stuff to be like 11, 12, 13. We want them to idle a little bit stronger. They're giving us plus or minus 5.2 out of 10.5. This injector measured at 9.12. So in this stand, to get a green check mark, if you throw an injector in there and it gives you 10.5 minus 5.2, so 5.7, you get a green check mark. In a cold weather day, you're going to start that truck, the oil is going to be real thick, the oil pump requires a lot of horsepower. That truck doesn't want to run with a poop because it doesn't have enough horsepower when these things all idle at 5 to turn that oil pump, so they just don't run good until they get warmed up. On EM2, we've got 4.7 plus or minus 2.8, and our aftermarket injector gives you a 3.33. So VE, we got 3.1 plus or minus 2.5. We're at 1.89. So all the emission set points, our aftermarket stuff is meeting those set points. We've just proved that. This is the OEM test stand. We're meeting all those set points except for the wide open throttle set point. That's the one that gives you the extra 50 horsepower. You don't get 50 horsepower at idle. You don't get 50 horsepower at like half throttle. You only get 50 horsepower at wide open throttle. Thank you, sir. So this is number 6, and you got 156.28 out of it. So even using this stand, these injectors balanced tighter than factory specs, even using this stand. But using something that has rail pressure really, really tight. Jeffy, can you please take me and print me out a sheet that we will give to all of our customers?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go.
So on the injector body itself, there is a serial number. We just ran them and recorded the serial number with all the settings being ran. So what Jeff is going to do is he's going to take these, and because there's way too damn much data here for any of you to understand, we're not going to give this to you. But he's going to put all these numbers into a pretty looking, that's just a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, right?
Excel spreadsheet, yep.
So we've built this spreadsheet. It's got technician's initials, it's got date, and all the set points that you or a competent tuner is going to really want. And if you've got a Bosch or a Motec for all the aftermarket race guys, then basically what we can do is we can build you your custom set of injectors, and basically for $100 an hour, we can go through and build all of the set points using those test stands. And it usually takes, for like a full injector breakdown, 8 to 10 hours. So it's damn near $1,000, but if you've got a Bosch or if you've got a Motec, then you're 20 grand deep into electronics. you've got a $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 set of injectors, you've got a $50,000 to $80,000 motor. The extra $1,000 is something that we have to charge you because I can't just donate 10 hours of labor towards your project, but it gives you guys the opportunity and the ability for your tuner to have exact flow data and give you the absolute best running vehicle without hurting any of the motor, any of the turbo, any of the anything. It just takes us time to do that. So again, every single set of injectors will have one of these flow sheets printed out. Just recently, even for mechanically injected injectors, when we use a when we've got a spring and a shim and a nozzle, the springs are going to be brand new, and when they take a set, when they get just a little bit weak after being cycled about 15 or 20 minutes, they soften just a little bit, and that will drop your opening pressure or your pop pressure. So what we try and do is we try and set them like 3 to 5 bar high. If I'm asking for 270 to run in the truck, then we're going to set it at 273 to 275, and then 15 minutes later in the truck, you'll notice if you pull them back out that it would drop that 3 or 5 bar. So recently, to try and, these guys, this shop, we got EDM. The EDM guy screws up, or the EDM wire doesn't do what it's supposed to do. The guy on the AFM or the extrude hone catches that. So there's a check and a balance. Now, if the guy on the extrude hone does something incorrectly, or the guy on the AFM does something incorrectly, these guys catch that. With mechanically injected stuff, the guy grabs a bin of nozzles, he goes through the pop testing procedure, and if he screws up, then nobody ever catches that. So he would handwrite little notes on what the opening pressure was, and warranties come back, things like that come back, and they're way off. We're like, okay, well, is it the guy? Did the spring change that much? What's going on? So driving down the road one day, I was thinking, how can I build a check and a balance for that system as well? And I came up with, he has to write down the shim inside the injector and the opening pressure of that injector, and then he comes over here and he prints out one of these sheets. So if something comes back in for a warranty concern, we look to make sure that if he said it was a 171 shim or a 205 shim or 168 shim, that injector still has that shim in it, and we look to see how much the opening pressure changed. So it's just a good way to check and balance even old mechanical stuff. So Jeff, what did you come up with?
Here's our flow sheet that we send out with every set of injectors that we send out.
Yep.
Average idle variance was 3.7. The variance on full wide open idle VL was 1.81%.
So this is the sheet that you'll get with all of our common rail injectors. And this is exactly how we create those sheets. You're not going to see two of these sheets ever look the exact same because number 1 through number 6 isn't ever going to spit the exact same out. So if you grabbed 100 boxes of our injectors, the set points are going to be the same, but the actual millimeters cubed measured isn't going to be the exact same. This isn't just a bullshit sheet. This is a real thing, like a fingerprint for your set of injectors. And I strongly advise that you put this in the glove box of the vehicle, because if you ever want to send them back in here, the first thing out of our mouth is going to be, give us the invoice from when you bought them, and do you have the flow sheet still? Because we would like to document like where they left compared to where they're coming back and figure out what the real issue is. So please, if you get these, when you go to a shop installs a set of injectors, do not let them throw this away. Ask them for the flow sheet. You paid for it. Put it in your glove box with your insurance card and your registration, all the other stuff, your tire receipts, your alignment receipts. Keep it. All right? Jeffy, anything else?
That's it.
Thanks, bro.
Thank you.
Booyah. See you guys.